Indonesia is playing an important role in the geopolitical platform, essentially by hosting several summits. Last year it was the G20 summit, and this year it is the ASEAN summit meetings that will take place in Jakarta in the first week of September. With me is the Indonesian Ambassador to Delhi. Ma'am, welcome to WION. It's a pleasure speaking to you. And the first question is, your country is going to host the ASEAN summit meetings, which will see a number of world leaders attending, not only from the grouping but outside the grouping as well. In fact, Indian Prime Minister is also expected to travel to Jakarta. So what kind of preparations your country is doing to welcome or roll out the red carpet for the world leaders?
First, thank you so much for having me once again. On ASEAN chairmanship, Indonesia focused on two main issues. One is, of course, logistics. When you have more than 10, 15 leaders coming to your country, of course, it's logistically, we need to be prepared in the detailed arrangement of it. The meetings started with SOM and then continue on with the foreign ministers meeting as preparation for the summit on the 5th and to 7th of September. Of course, with the thematic issues under the big theme of ASEAN Matters Epicentrum of Growth, substantively also we as the chair, we prepare the issues in a very thoughtful manner. If you notice, the issue is a continuation of our presidency of G20 last year on health, on food and energy security, on climate change. So many issues that we have carried on during our presidency of G20, it's carried over once again in ASEAN since the beginning of our chairmanship in January. For the epicentrum of growth, we are focusing on what the core issue that we are experiencing globally, not only regionally, not only nationally, but globally, which is the food and energy security, the climate change, the disaster, digitalization, and whatnot. So I think the ASEAN chairmanship of Indonesia and G20 chairmanship or presidency of India is in line in thoughts and in views. It is important to make discussion on common concerns, global common concerns that is, to be led by emerging economies or developing countries such as India and Indonesia. So it is important that we have seen the convergence of issues between the two between G20 and ASEAN.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see India-ASEAN relationship going forward with Indonesia as the host? The Indian Prime Minister is expected to travel, and last year we saw the Indian Vice President traveling, where there was an elevation in the relationship.
Yeah, but last year we elevate, you mentioned about the elevation to comprehensive strategic partnership, but this year is very important for both sides to jolt down, to concretize the implementation of such partnership. It's the elevation as a document, as a leader's declaration, needs to be implemented in real terms. So the attendance, hopefully by the Prime Minister, will show how India sees ASEAN as an important player in the Indo-Pacific region. And therefore, the plan of action between ASEAN and India 5 years on from now, it's also very significant to both to implement the declaration of the comprehensive strategic partnership. Yeah.
The White House has announced that President Biden will not be attending ASEAN meetings, and it will be the Vice President who will be attending the meeting. So do you see a disappointment, or is it part and parcel of hosting summits? Because at the end of the day, India also last year was present at the level of Vice President. And also hosting a summit is a difficult task. We, of course, are hosting the G20 summit. Logistically, it is something that requires a lot of planning. So when it comes to Jakarta, there are concerns over pollution. Do you think that is a worrisome factor?
I think Indonesia managed, I think, much and many of the summits pretty well in the past. So hopefully this one, hopefully will also be successful and smooth. But your concern has merit. Therefore, we already implement steps. For example, this week the government of Jakarta started the 50% working from home for the staff of the government of Jakarta. And second, we also, like what we have done in G20 Bali, we also tried very best, learning from India, using the EV, for example, to just reduce the pollution. And if you mention about the non-attendance of some leaders, we do understand that next year or even this year, the global dynamics, individual country-wise, is a challenge. You know, there are challenges, not only in the US, but also in some other parts of the world. So for us, Indonesia, the most important thing, the discussion, deliberations need to be inclusive. Means in the inclusivity is that all attend, all parties attend the meeting. So if the Vice President of the US coming, thank God, because then US will be represented at the highest level. So for us, inclusivity in any kind of diplomatic engagement is very important. Rather than when we say ASEAN 10, ASEAN 11, but you know, many not attended, then we are lost.
Now, coming to India a bit, India is going to host the G20 summit. What's your expectation? You're part of the Troika. Any suggestion to the Indian presidency? Because it's a very difficult process, not only logistically, but also in terms of putting the joint statement.
Well, I have to say this, and I said in many occasions that your presidency needs a praise because it's done in, I don't know, more than 60 cities, hundreds of meetings, more than any G20 presidency has done in the past. So your leadership needs a praise. And on top of it, you introduce some issues that maybe some G20 members are not used to discuss. Like, for example, the startup. It's a very relevant current issue to be discussed. But in the past, no one talks about the startup. And also women-led development. There is none in the agenda. So this is what I said in many occasions, and now I said it again. What India has done in G20 is to introduce new issues, but actually it's not new because we already all experience it from the grassroots. So I think India will done tremendously, and we wish India all the best in the summit with all countries represented at the highest level. And hopefully the deliberation and discussion will be fruitful one.
India has invited several countries, and India wants the voice of the global South to be represented, and also inclusion of African Union in the grouping. What do you have to say on that?
So Indonesia commend the effort of India to invite Africa because like last year, Indonesia also invited Pacific, as we see they're in the neighborhood and they are underrepresented, but at the same time they're facing the same challenges like us. What India has done with inviting Africa is to show that what happened in Africa is actually also happening to us in a different level kind of thing. So we commend India for that effort. Secondly, we need to understand that G20 is informal gathering. There is no set of rules of who to be invited, who are there, who should be sitting as observer, as invitees or whatever. However, when you give the concept of expansion, you need to also bear in mind to what extent the expansion is. As such, Indonesia sees that criteria, modalities of expansion need to be discussed and be agreed upon by all.
Hosting a summit also focuses on a joint statement. Indonesia had to struggle through it since the outbreak of the Ukraine conflict. Are you hopeful this time around the bridge can be divided between G7 and Russia and China?
So last year when we were the president of G20, we did not have joint communique throughout the year. But we are happy that at last the leader's statement is there, the agreement is there. We see the effort of India bridging all differences. And we also support the idea that India always push forward, saying that we need to focus on the common concerns rather than focusing on one single issues that only happen or impacted to only some countries, not globally. Conflicts and tensions are very important to be dealt with by peaceful means, by dialogue, but it should not jeopardize or hampering the effort to find a conclusion on common concerns. Many common concerns that post-pandemic, especially like post-pandemic economic recovery, disaster management, climate change, many common concerns that needs to be prioritized by G20 in the discussion, not only one issues which impacted only few countries.
Ma'am, talking about another grouping, that's the BRICS grouping. Now, the BRICS summit is happening today. Your president has been invited by host South Africa. How do you see BRICS as a grouping? And there is a talk of expansion there as well. Would Indonesia be keen to be part of this grouping? Has Indonesia spoken about it with BRICS member countries, including India?
Well, my president is there for this summit as the invitees, as the friends of BRICS, they say. It shows the interest is there. But again, the principle of expansion or membership maintains. We maintain that position that criteria, modalities needs to be discussed and be agreed upon. And secondly, we see BRICS as an important engagement. But at the same time, we also need to bear in mind that so many organizations or multilaterally, regionally, in the world now, currently, pluralism is in place. So we need to, again, focus on not only meetings of leaders, but how to make the meeting itself be concretized or be implemented in concrete way.
And you're hopeful that when it comes to expansion, there can be some positive news?
Some positive news on the modalities and criteria, yes.
Now coming to India bit, India-Indonesia relationship. But before I can ask that question, I would like to ask about very important development today. That's the Chandrayaan-3. The entire country is very happy about it. Yes. What's your view? What's your take? And perhaps some wishes to many Indians who will be closely hoping that India lands on the moon.
Oh, all the best, because we are so looking forward. We work with ISRO because they have their satellite home ground in Indonesia as well. So we hope for the best for India to make to the moon. So it's very proud moments for everyone to see the process, to understand the efforts that, that made until this time. Is it going to happen today? Hopefully, inshallah. Is it happen tomorrow? But still, we're happy for India. So wishing India the best, all the best, all the best.
Thanks, ma'am. Now coming to the relationship bit, how do you see the trajectory of this relationship? Now, the Indian Prime Minister travels to Indonesia, second time in less than 1 year now. So essentially focus has been on connectivity. I believe a direct flight has also started. If you can shed some light on this relationship.
Okay, the connectivity is literally take off. Two already. Hopefully in the near future from Delhi. We already have Chennai, Mumbai, and hopefully in the near future Delhi. It's literally take off, and so I hope that our relationship is also taking off, because next year we will celebrate 75 years of anniversary of the bilateral relations, and we see that the visit of Prime Minister Modi in the near future, hopefully for ASEAN in India relationship, also a sign of hope that India and Indonesia relationship also taking off. Most importantly, for the connectivity bit, I think what we need to do is to make sure that the traffic is there. The people-to-people contact needs to be enhanced and strengthened. Not only through tourism, the embassy, myself and my team focus on health sector, education sector, business for sure. So the connectivity itself, establishing direct flight, it's easy maybe. But most importantly, to make sure there are traffics for this connectivity to be successful.
But I believe there was a conversation between connectivity between Aceh and Andaman. What's the progress like?
Up until now, feasibility study is done. We need to see because in the feasibility study, it needs to have another project proposal by 24, and then the project hopefully will be done since 25. But so the feasibility study is done already, and I thank you, the government of India, for making it happen, for the study to finish and complete. So we do hope that next year something will happen for the project itself.
And ma'am, what kind of cooperation are you looking when it comes to the defense bit as well? There have been murmurs and rumors, as we all know, about BrahMos as well. But talking about this component of the relationship, where do you see it going forward?
In the defense sector, I think we are in the very good relations, not so much of buying or trading part, but the defense dialogue is there, visit of ships are there. For the first time in so many years, we had a warship coming to Andaman Nicobar for training, between them. So it's a good thing. Now we are in a good position. But for the trading part, maybe we need to discuss more with India on how to make it happen.
India recently banned the export of rice as well. Has this impacted your country, and have you raised the matter with the Indian side?
Diplomatically, we have raised not so much of the ban, because in the past also Indonesia did the same thing, and then the impact is very negative, not only for those who import the products, but also for maintaining the stability of price in the world, the world price. So our hope is that Indian government will consider to review this policy, so that the fluctuation, the stability of world price for commodities, any commodities, will happen. Because currently, as you may see, because the climate change, the rains, the heats, everywhere in the world, the wildfire, we need to ensure that the commodity price is secure, and a challenge in fluctuation needs some solutions. And that is why we do humbly request the government of India to review this policy.
Ma'am, my final question, and no conversation can be complete when it comes to Indonesia, is the cultural similarities between the two sides. Last year I was in Bali, and it was very pleasantly surprising to see the place had so many rituals which were similar here in India. So what kind of cultural connect or shared cultural heritage both countries have and plan to progress on it?
The cultural, I see that I mentioned this to a gathering of FICCI, one of the Chamber of Commerce of India. I said that we need to focus on RICH, rich, the religion, the culture and social and history. And I think what we need to understand is the historical background between the two nations, because sometimes we forgot about the importance of the past to whatever happens in the present and the future. So if you ask plans, many plans, because like I said, we at the embassy, my team and I, focus on cooperation between universities, cooperation between think tanks, just to find out what sort of a past experience between two nations that we can go beyond the past to the future.
Well, thank you so much, ma'am, for giving your time to us. And it was a pleasure speaking to you on a host of subjects, whether it's ASEAN, G20 or BRICS. And this conversation, of course, will continue. Thank you so much, ma'am, for speaking to WION.
Thank you.